Good morning, Rodney.
How are you, James?
I'm doing well, and I assume a lot of the folks on the Tighter Insider message boards have been riding high pretty well as well, because last week we were kind of on the cusp of a big recruiting week, and looking back, Rodney, I tell you what, this was a really outstanding recruiting week for Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide.
Yeah, picked up two really good players, great in-state players. Demoy Kennedy from Theodore, an outstanding linebacker prospect, really versatile, could play inside, could play outside, could play both, So I think when you look at him athletically, if you've got a chance to watch his tape, James, or your listeners out there, go Google Demoy Kennedy. Watch his junior highlights. This kid has a burst like none other. I really am very impressed with him. Same high school as C.J. Mosley from several years ago, as you recall. So outstanding pickup there. And also Quandarius Robinson, who some consider the number one player in the state of Alabama, out of Jackson-Olin, a school that Alabama hasn't picked up anyone from since 1991, I think, James, when David Palmer came out. So that's been a long time. And, Quandarius is a great prospect, again, 6'5", 220, defensive end, outside backer type, a guy that's really versatile. And, again, number one player in the state, according to some. So that's always a big pickup.
So I know you were very high last week when talking to Gary Harris at this time last week, as far as just in the bigger picture, Alabama's recruiting on the defensive side of the ball and the potential you think that could translate onto the field in the near future. As far as, because we've got a lot of track record when it comes to certainly recruiting under Nick Saban, of course, the on-field product on the defensive side. Do you think, as far as maybe now the 12 going into 13 seasons for Nick Saban, as far as when it comes to recruiting, that maybe he's doing some of his best recruiting on that side of the ball?
Certainly hasn't slowed down, I'll put it that way. Obviously he's done extremely well. They've had great defenses for the most part. And even their defenses that weren't considered great were only not considered that because the Alabama standard. Like last year, probably 98% of the teams in the country, if not more, would have loved to have had the defense that Alabama had, but by Bama standards, it wasn't quite what we'll remember as one of the better ones under Nick Saban, but doesn't mean they were bad. But I think he's doing extremely well, James. They're doing extremely well in recruiting defensive players. Last year in this past class, these kids that will be true freshmen this year, I thought that was a tremendous defensive line class. They brought in a great secondary class again. They did bring in some really good linebackers, probably missed on one or two inside that could have been very helpful to them. But I still think overall, when you talk about a guy like Shane Lee, who's in now, who came in early, Christian Harris, who's now here, those are two really fine-looking, I think, prospects at the inside backer spots. King Makuta, Kevin Harris are two outstanding outside backer types that they brought in. And then when you look at this year's class, I think it's kind of filling maybe what they didn't get overall at the linebacker spot last year. I think when you look at the guys they're getting this year, certainly this has a chance to be the number one linebacker class in the country. And when you combine it with, the other younger kids that they have, it's very impressive.
I tell you what, it's sounding like, Rodney, that as far as even what you told us last week, look out college football when it comes to, especially if these recruits live up to the hype that they've had on the recruiting trail and translate that to on-field success down the road. So as far as just staying on that defensive side of the ball, certainly you mentioned already with Kennedy and Robinson as far as some outstanding pickups for Alabama just within a week, a couple of days really, of each other. I think you have on TighterInsider.com right now, actually I'm looking at Alabama could be closing in on another elite pass rusher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think Will Anderson from Hampton, Georgia will make his decision early this afternoon, make his announcement. And, he's, again, it's a top player. He's rated at top 100 in the country. A guy that is 6'3.5", 237, has a great first step, very athletic, coming off that edge, and we talked to Coach Fed, his high school coach, Clifford Fed, last week, and he talked about, and actually raved about, Will Anderson as a pass rusher. And he's a guy, when you look at his frame, and we've seen Alabama do this before, you bring in a guy like that, he's got it looks like a lot of room to grow, get bigger. So I think that certainly is an option when you talk about maybe not just limited to being an outside backer, but could grow into maybe a defensive end or maybe a hybrid player, however you want to look at it. Only time will tell, but certainly a guy that tremendous athlete, 5-star athlete, in my opinion, when you look at him, just his athletic skills. And by the way, Coach Fed really talked about how he is a tremendous leader for their football program, both on and off the field. And I think, James, when you talk about the total package and getting those kind of kids, those are the ones that really make a strong difference in your program. Not just great football players, but guys who you can count on to do the right things and kind of, as Coach Saban always likes to say, impact others in a positive way.
So going from the defensive side to the offensive side of the ball, recent news, in fact, just over the last 24 hours or so, as far as Alabama getting ready to add a graduate transfer in Landon Dickerson from Florida State. That was a top 35 recruit coming out of high school. What does he add to this Alabama roster, especially from an offensive line standpoint?
I think that's a great question, James. And the reason is a lot of Alabama fans are thinking, well, we've recruited all these great offensive linemen and we're going to bring in a grad transfer. First of all, he is talented. He started as a true freshman at Florida State. He's been injured a lot, only played in 6 games the last couple of seasons due to injuries, but he is extremely talented. He's experienced. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining. But here's the thing, I think, with all of those things, here's the topper to me, is that he has the versatility to legitimately play every position up front on the offensive line, including center. So I think that's really big when you look at Alabama right now. They have an interior offensive guard spot there with Deontay Brown probably. Well, he is suspended for 4 games, so possibly Dickerson could compete at that spot, maybe with Matt Womack. And again, this is just speculation. But he could certainly compete there. But not only that, I'm not sure with the loss of Ross Pierce-Baker that Alabama has made a final decision on I'm sure Nick Saban would say any position, but certainly center would be one that I think he could come in and legitimately compete in August to possibly start. I mean, again, that's not taking anything away from the other guys there, whether it's Chris Owens or Emil Ekiyor or even the young freshman Darian Dalcourt. But when you have a guy that's experienced like Dickerson, maybe he comes in and could challenge at that center spot, and that would be really valuable.
So really, in your eyes, this is a big-time pickup for Alabama from an immediacy standpoint.
Well, I think I think it certainly could be. I mean, he's 6'5", plus. He's 310, 320. So he's a big, strong guy, obviously, with a lot of experience and tremendous versatility. And when you talk about that versatility, we mentioned guard, we mentioned center. But, I mean, he's a guy that could legitimately, if you needed him, he could be a swing player, play tackle, whatever spot it is. And to be honest with you, James, those are hard to come by. Experienced guys that could do all those things. It's, again, extremely valuable to depth purposes.
We're talking with Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com on the Bud Light Hotline presented by Adams Beverages. So you mentioned the versatility for Landon Dickerson as far as his ability to potentially play any of the offensive line spots. Rodney, that sounds like a comparison to me when I hear that coming from you as far as a past Alabama, one of Nick Saban's best offensive linemen since he came to Alabama when it comes to Barrett Jones. How good of a comparison as far as just the versatility is that for someone like Landon Dickerson?
Comparing him to Barrett Jones?
Absolutely.
That versatility certainly is something that I think would be comparable in terms of just being able to do it. Again, I don't want to compare him to Barrett Jones because he certainly has not played nearly the amount of football that Barrett Jones did. And Barrett Jones, as you know, started as a redshirt freshman and at right guard on that national championship team, or maybe it was left guard. He played right guard too. He played every spot, as you mentioned up front. Won the Outland, didn't he? As a left tackle, and was the Dave Remington winner, if I'm not mistaken, as a center. The guy did just about everything. But yeah, again, just having a guy that is capable of doing that. We've seen Alabama under Nick Saban several times. A guy that really comes to mind is how about Alfred McCullough? He played guard, he played tackle. He was very valuable at one point when DJ Fluker went down in one of those seasons at right tackle. He was, I think, in the 2011 season, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'm going off memory. Was valuable at right guard down the stretch of the season. So anytime you have a guy with that kind of versatility, it's extremely valuable to be able to have something like that as an insurance policy at all those spots. But again, I'm not just saying he is that. I think he's more than that, Landon Dickerson. I think he's a guy that can legitimately challenge, and maybe, given Alabama's situation right now, maybe he could challenge it at right guard or possibly center.
So looking at the bigger picture then for that offensive line, with the addition of Landon Dickerson, how would you evaluate as far as just the depth that Alabama's offensive line will have for this year?
Well, it could be good. It could be good. I think they like to have at least 8 that they could count on, and they probably are close to that, or getting there, or have a chance to get there, I would think, when you start looking at it. I'm not really sure. Again, I think Evan Neal at left guard, the true freshman, will have a great shot there. Maybe even Emil Ekiyor. I know he's working at center too, and certainly will challenge at center. Those are young players. You've got Matt Womack coming back. You've got Cornbread Deontay Brown coming back at right guard after that 4-game suspension. Those are some really good interior players. We mentioned Chris Owens at center, who actually left the spring practice as the number 1 guy at that spot, for at least for now, I think. And then at tackle, you've got Alex Leatherwood out there at left tackle, shifting from right guard, and Jedrick Wills, and don't forget now, Matt Womack could also play right tackle because that's the spot he started 15 games, or I think it was 15 games in 2017. So again, you're starting to see the versatility and some depth being created there.
We're talking with Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, and this is kind of changing gears when it comes to recruiting, but more so about the industry of recruiting evaluation, because you've been in this for a while now. As far as TiderInsider.com, you've forgotten more than I'll ever know when it comes to recruiting. So I'm just kind of curious as far as what you've seen from the recruiting industry when it comes to evaluating prospects, whether it's a 4-star or especially 5-star prospects. How have you seen the recruiting industry change, but also change for the better when it comes to just evaluating blue chip prospects and prospects in general when it comes to getting that information to your audience?
Well, back when I started following it, James, was in the 70s, and there was really one guy that I recall doing it back then, Joe Terranova from Detroit, Michigan, and he was an executive with the Ford Motor Company up there in Dearborn, Michigan, outside of Detroit. And he used to spend his extra time watching tape videos or back then film of the top high school prospects in the country. He used to say he watched the top 500 and made his own judgments based on that, and also talking to coaches, and probably did a fantastic job for back in the day. But now you've got these networks that they have guys all over the place that are evaluating and watching these players. And I want to be clear, I don't know enough about those people and what their knowledge is, and I don't put as much stock in what most of them say versus what Nick Saban says, or Jimbo Fisher, or whoever it is. A coach certainly that does this for a living, most of those guys are going to be a lot better than some guy who's out there that maybe is just doing this and, not necessarily an expert, but I think overall they do a, pretty good job of probably attaching the stars to them. But there's so many different things, so many factors that go into evaluating a prospect. Some of it you can't predict. So, it's again, I think the coaches are the ones that are the best evaluators.
All right, Rodney, before we let you go, remind us how we can join the Tighter Insider community.
TighterInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. That's just $4 a month. You can get instant access with your credit card, or if you prefer, there's an address there to send a check. Again, gives you the premium information, but all the discussion, and we post a lot of information on our forum too, our All Sports forum. Tons of discussion. And James, guess what? Another prospect. We mentioned Will Anderson earlier. He's supposed to commit early this afternoon. We think it's Alabama, but Georgia Tech and LSU in there as well. So we'll have that, when that happens.
There you go, folks. Another good visit with Rodney Orr. Thank you, Rodney.
Appreciate it, James. Take care.